Hi, I'm Barry Zwarenstein. Many years ago, I was fortunate enough to be trained in the Seven Habits by Stephen Covey. And what brought these habits home to me quite profoundly shortly afterwards was getting into a massive argument with my son, who at that point was significantly taller and stronger than I was. And it just triggered me, and I was in a position where I just wasn't going to listen. So I got very defensive, and the more defensive I got, the more the situation just deteriorated. Till eventually, this habit just came into my head, and this voice went off, which was seek first to understand before you expect to be understood. And it was like I did an instant replay at that point where I said to him, look, I'm sorry, it just triggered me. I got pretty defensive. Just tell me what's happening so I can understand. And the very act of creating space for another person to communicate immediately downregulated everything. And we actually arrived at a win-win where I just listened, everything calmed down, I reached a different level of understanding. We both heard each other, and as a result, we were able to move forward in a really constructive way. So, one of the things I've really shared with veterans that I work with, and these are men and women, and even non-veteran population, is that really start to think about listening, giving the other person space to communicate. Now, it doesn't mean that they are right or wrong. It just means that you care about another person enough to go, right, I'm going to give you some space. I'm going to stand back, and I really want to try and understand where you're coming from. It's not a compromise to do that at all. I think often folk have said to me, look, if I'm being screamed at, or my partner is just saying, look, I'm just not happy with you and I'm irritated with what you're doing, I want to stand up and I want to justify myself straight away because I don't want to be blamed. And I guess what I realized was when somebody wants to speak their truth to us, we decide whether we want to experience that as blame or not. For me, it's not blame. Somebody's bringing some energy to us. Somebody's bringing just their truth to us. It's their truth. And everybody's entitled to their truth. Whether we interpret that as a finger point, or as what I say is whether our little boy or our little girl jumps up and starts to stomp and have a temper tantrum, that is up to us. So the important thing, I think, is one, is everybody's entitled to share their truth and share their experience with us. It is just their perception. They may experience that as the truth, but that's okay. That's their reality. We do not have to compromise on that if it doesn't make sense. But what we are able to do is simply listen and create space. Now, guys have often said to me, so what does that mean? And I go, well, first thing you need to do is just things like, tell me more. I'd like to understand why you're saying this. Give me some examples of what makes you say this. So you're keeping the space open, you're inviting the other person to communicate, and you're giving them the time to share what's jumping around inside their bodies and inside their mind. Often the very act of being heard, as I said, downregulates. People will automatically go, you know what, thanks for listening. And that very act of being listened to is already a solution to the core issue which was being raised in the first place. So time and time again, as the days progress ahead of all of you, think about opportunities where somebody brings something to you. Be aware of what it's triggering. Is your little boy or your little girl just jumping up and stomping and deciding this is going to turn into a power play and it's a win-lose or a lose-win, but you're going to make sure you hit the win. Think about if that's happening. Be aware of that. Stand in front of your little boy or your girl and just ask questions like, tell me more. Why do you say that? Help me to understand. Now, certainly, if the communication around this is abusive, it's about really making clear some boundaries. The boundaries are simply around the fact of saying, look, I'm happy to listen to you, but calling me names, swearing at me or raging at me is not something that's going to work. Maybe we need to take a time out and come back to this when you're able to communicate in a way that works for both of us. So it's not about allowing yourself to be abused. So give yourself an opportunity. It'll be really interesting to see how that works if you do something different, and to see if you both end up with a win-win. Your connection becomes a lot stronger and the potential for conflict dissipates, and you both working shoulder to shoulder as you move ahead. Okay, so wishing you all a good win-win. Remember to seek first to understand before you expect to be understood, and wishing you all a good week ahead of you. Cheers. Bye.